Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Molefe, thank you. You were here earlier today when Ms. Klein and Ms. Naidu gave evidence, is that correct? One of the issues that they raised was the state of the Eskom when they arrived, and would have been around about the same time when you arrived, and you also gave an indication of almost a chaotic situation when you arrived. What steps did you take in terms of the PMFA to report that state of affairs to the shareholder, do you think, and do you think that sufficient steps were taken to alleviate your concerns in terms of the PMFA, which sets out certain obligations from a board perspective?
Well, I mean, the issues of the board and governance and so on were very well known. In fact, I think that is why there had been so many changes, because there had been unhappiness. What I must say is, when you arrive in a situation like that, you choose the battles that you want to fight. The battle that I chose was load shedding, and that is the matter that I focused on. In fact, you know, I would sit and listen to arguments and so on about issues that I considered at that time to be very peripheral and even petty in the face of load shedding. So what I did and what I tried to get the executives to focus on was a single-mindedness to end load shedding. And I'm happy to report that eventually that was cracked, that was achieved. But unfortunately, I think in my head, I sort of thought that we will resolve the other issues as we go on. But if we can crack load shedding, firstly, secondly, the financial turnaround of the entity to get some financial respectability. So yes, that is what we focused on.
We've heard evidence about the 4 executives that were suspended, and then there was the Denton's report, and you came soon thereafter. So did you take steps to implement the Denton's report as well, which highlighted a lot of issues relating to diesel expenses and a lot of procurement issues which in their view breached the PMFA as well?
Actually, I never read the Denton's report. And the issue of the 4 executives, I considered it as an issue above my pay grade. But what I did when I was there is that by the time we stopped load shedding, we also stopped expenses on diesel. I think we came to this committee and reported that the diesel expense has come down from, I think, 1.6 billion rand a month to 0 over a period of time. And so we worked on, in practical way, resolving these issues rather than bicker about it.
Yes.
I found more value in actually doing things than just arguing about it.
Yes, but we know the Denton's report was drafted at great expense, and it's quite strange that you didn't see fit to read it. Was it because it was held back by Mr. Gubani, or what was the reason for not reading that?
Well, it was a board document about matters that had happened before I got to Eskom. And so I didn't want to concern myself about who had done what before I arrived. As I say, my focus was load shedding.
Correctly, I think, but it did highlight some of the major issues relating to diesel procurements. And McKinsey representative that came here, he claimed credit for reducing the diesel costs as part of justifying their 1 billion rand expenditure.
Yeah.
Would you dispute that or not?
No, anybody can claim the credit for having done it. What matters for me is that the expenditure was stopped. So whether it was myself or Mr. Matona or whoever did or McKinsey, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that it was stopped. And whoever wants to take credit for it is fine. They can take credit for it. As long as it was stopped, it did not continue. So we addressed the problems with diesel in a very practical way of simply stopping it. You remember that the regulator did not allow diesel in the previous tariff application. They disallowed it. They said this was not a necessary expenditure. So rather than fight with the regulator about not allowing the diesel expenditure, which I thought at the time was being utilized to avoid load shedding, we stopped it. We found ways and strategies to stop it. And if there are other people that claim that they did it, well and good, but it stopped.
Thank you. One of our challenges is the evidence that was given by yourself about the condition of Eskom when you arrived and the state of the documentation of the board, the record keeping. This morning, Ms. Klein said, I don't think you were here when she gave evidence, you came later, but she said the board struggled with not having all the required information at hand when submissions were presented. She says it now appears that many of the submissions that were considered in my time, that's by the board, contained misleading information or completely omitted critical information. What compounded matters even further for me is that there are now differing versions of matters that I previously thought I fully understood. So our challenge is, how can we believe what board members tell us if that is the state of documentation and the state of evidence that was presented by board members? Are you able to comment on that? Was it a similar situation?
I think there is, well, I don't know now, but when I certainly was there was scope to improve the way that we did things, and it had to do with the way that we structured as I said earlier, the structures of the board as well as the structures of management. So and the role of Exco, and the fact that it should not have been possible for members of Exco to take documents to the board that have not been through Exco or that have not been seen by the GCE. I actually even felt like people will think I want to control too much by wanting to see everything that goes to the board. But that was certainly not the culture at Eskom. At Eskom, it's possible for a group of people to meet and go directly to the board with a document that when you read later, you're uncomfortable with.
The issue you correctly pointed out in your statement that I referred to findings in the Public Protector's report, and maybe you are correct that there was a lot of observations as opposed to findings. But
there were simply no findings.
Well, let's just have a look here on page 339. There's a paragraph J that says Mr. Molefe's relationship with the Gupta family as well as the directors of Tegeta cannot be ignored. There was a firm line of communication between Mr. AJ Gupta and Mr. Molefe. Now, in my view, that is a prima facie finding. It might not be under the heading at the end of findings, but that is a factual prima facie evidence. And I appreciate your dilemma that you took legal advice, but that sentence stands as a factual statement. Well, it's on page 339, but so I appreciate your legal counsel saying that there were no remedial findings, and the fact that most of the report says it is apparent, and that those are observances. But that is let me just help you again. It's page 339, at the top, paragraph I. Mr. Molefe's relationship with the Gupta family as well as the directors of Tegeta cannot be ignored, comma. There was a firm line of communication between Mr. AJ Gupta and Mr. Molefe. Now, one can contextualize. Sorry.
You say that is a finding.
Well, it's a prima facie evidence.
I have just been at pains to explain that what she calls the firm line of communications was these phone calls that she refers to, and there is nowhere where she mentions exactly the time, telephone numbers, and where the phone call was made from with Mr. A.J. Gupta. So she then jumps to this firm line of communication. Well, she still needs to show us how that firm line
Mr.
works.
Molefe, sorry, I agree with you on your disputing the building blocks, but she reaches that point of conclusion. That, sadly, is an issue that you could have reviewed, because that is a conclusion of facts that you dispute. You follow? So I'm just saying that as an example of something that could be seen as a finding, because if you then look at her, if you just allow me to, paragraph 8.1.1, where she, in terms of the Public Protectors Act, in terms of section 64C1, she brings to the notice of the NPA and the Hawks those matters identified in this report where it appears crimes have been committed. Now, that in legal parlance is prima facie evidence. Prima facie evidence, which he then sends for investigation to the NPA and to the Hawks in terms of the Public Protectors Act. So without debating, I understand your dilemma, and I'm saying that in my view that could be seen as a finding, and you are welcome to differ from me and say, in your view, it's not a finding. But it does rate, but to be fair to you, there is a previous sentence, and I believe in fairness, where she says that she uses the word appear, and I think that does give a semblance of, this is at 315. As mentioned above, it appears to be a clear line of communication between Mr. Molefe. These communications were made during a critical period. So, to be fair to you, one can debate backwards and forwards whether it is a finding or an observation. Okay, so that's to help you in that regard as well. But then, if we can just take this issue of the public protectors' observations stroke findings further, what we see...
sorry, with respect, there is no observations stroke findings. It's just observations.
Well, I think I tend to differ from you,
look at
because there are certain findings. There are findings at the end.
Which finding did you find?
Sorry?
Which finding, for example?
I gave you the illustration of the one finding.
Actually, that finding is under the heading of observations, paragraph 7.
In my view, it's a factual finding, and we can agree to disagree.
I do not think it is a factual finding, because she says there is a firm line of communication. Now, where was that firm line of communication demonstrated? What are the facts behind her saying?
Mr. Molefe, we're going to be all night again. In my view, that is a factual finding. And that's my view. I'm entitled to it. You are entitled to differ from me on that.
I don't mind being here the whole night.
So,
but
you
mean
can't
that because
argue backwards and forwards. I'm also legally qualified. And in my view, that is a factual finding.
Because you're a very powerful person.
No, I'm not a more powerful person. That is my view. You're entitled on your legal counsel to say that is an observation, but I'm saying that that is a firm finding. There was a firm line of communication. Whether it is based on erroneous facts is something different. But let's just engage further, because here is more of an observation. You see, here she uses on page 326, she says, what is furthermore apparent. Now, most of her sentences, she uses the word apparent, or it appears. And you can argue that for that reason, it is an observation. But she says here that Mr. Molefe and Mr. Singh stated the following with regards to the contract awarded to Tegeta and the prepayment. And there's a long story here, and that the Tegeta indicated that the prepayment would enable them, you said, to purchase coal. Is that correct? To purchase coal? Are you 100% sure? What do you mean by purchase coal?
The prepayment was a payment for coal to be delivered over the next 3 months.
Prepayment in your version here would enable them to operationalize plant and equipment that had been placed on care and maintenance during the shutting of the export component of the mine. That has got nothing to do with purchasing coal. This is to operationalize plant and equipment. Do you dispute that version of what is put in the Public Protector's report?
With respect, sir, the reason the money was paid was to get coal. I will not get into what they used the money for, whether they operationalized plant or paid for Optimum or whatever they did. It's a bit like when you buy a car from Volkswagen. Do you ask the garage manager what they did with the money after you pay for your car?
Can I just, you see the paragraph 3, page 326, paragraph 0 says, Mr. Molefe and Mr. Singh stated the following with regards to the contract awarded to Tegeta and the prepayment. Tegeta indicated that this is quoting you and Mr. Singh. Tegeta indicated that the prepayment would enable them to operationalize plant and equipment that had been placed on care and maintenance during the shutting of the export component of the mine. So that is what you say it was used for, or Mr. Singh. And if you say you're not aware of it, then we'll ask Mr. Singh about it. That's on page 326 at the bottom. Do you not remember that, or do you dispute that? Sorry, have you been able to find it? I don't want to be unfair. Paragraph 0. It's paragraph O.
Oh, yeah.
And it's in italics, which indicates it's a quote from...
On 8 April 2016,
yes,
Tegeta made an offer to supply additional coal for
yes,
the Arnott power station from the Optimum coal mine over a period of 5 months. That is what I've just been trying
yes,
to say.
yes, that's correct.
That was our objective, was to get coal.
Okay.
So the rest of, we wanted to get coal for winter. That's what we wanted. That was our objective.
Okay, have a look at the top of the page then. Paragraph M. What is furthermore apparent is that given the timing of the prepayment, which was approved on 11 April 2016, it appears highly improbable that some, if not all, of the Eskom board who approved the payment had no knowledge of the true nature of the payment. Now, we know that in this version, the true nature of the payment was the payment to purchase the Optimum Mine, and that's 600 million, and that is one version, and you are welcome to dispute it. I think you've already disputed that, the figures, but there's other evidence that it went to the purchase of the Optimum Mine, and that is what is alluded to there.
But she does not state it as a fact.
Well, she builds up to that as well,
No,
previously.
she said
Finding,
what is furthermore apparent. So she's speculating.
No, she's not speculating. She has evidence before her. She refers to the evidence. Look at page 325. Have a look. Finding for the purchase of all the shares in OCH. Funding for the purchase of the shares. There has been speculation as to how Tegeta sourced the funds needed for the purchase. Now she reaches the conclusion. It was the prepayment of the 600 million that was used, the 586 million that was used to purchase those shares. And that's not the only evidence we've heard in that regard. But you're entitled to...
I don't know about you, Mr. Swart.
Yes.
English is not my first language. But
yes,
she says here, there has been much speculation as to how Tegeta sources the funds. And then she says, what is furthermore apparent.
Well, let me assist you, Mr. Molefe. Let's read paragraph K. Mr. Hauer, on behalf of Tegeta, in an interview with carte blanche, has stated that the funds were sourced using a mixture of debt and their own funding. Mr. Hauer further states the prepayment was used to service the Arnott contract. That's your version. And that drag lines were decommissioned in June, and the cost to restart these is 1 billion, which is nothing about operationalized plant and equipment. But anyway, paragraph L, these statements made by Mr. Hauer and Tegeta appear to be false. The prepayment of 659, inclusive of VAT, appears to be entirely for the purchase price of OCH. Now again, she uses the word appears. She uses the word appears, but that links it, the prepayment, to the purchase price, okay?
But
that links it.
The moment she says appears,
but you've got
it's
to...
the end of the matter for me. She's speculating.
Well, she's not... She might be, but she builds a case similarly with the other evidence. She's got banking details, she's got movement of funds, and again, you're quite right, you might say that you don't accept that, but there's a lot of other evidence as well that is before us. So it all culminates to the conclusion that prepayment was used to fund the OCM, the purchase of the OCM. And then she says, in the light of the above, on page 329, it appears that the conduct of the Eskom board, again appears, was solely, so it's an observation, was solely to benefit of Tegeta in awarding contracts.
It's not even an observation, it's speculation.
No.
Appears, sir, appears.
It's not. These are observations. She concludes by observations. But
no, when something appears to be like this, it's not an observation, it appears like something.
The whole basis of a report.
I mean, this could appear like a bottle of beer, but it isn't.
But do you dispute that? Do you dispute that? Do you dispute that the conduct of the Eskom board...
I don't dispute that she was basing her entire
Mr. Molefe, you're not listening. We're going to be all night because you're not allowing me to put questions to you. You really must allow me to complete my questions. In the light of the above, it appears that the conduct of the Eskom board was solely to benefit of Tegeta in awarding contracts to them, and thus it appears to be inconsistent with the PMFA. Would you disagree with that? Or are you unable to?
She says it is not, she does not say it is in contravention of the PMFA. She says it appears.
Why do you think that the business rescue practitioners filed a report with the Hawks that there'd been a contravention of Section 34 of the Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act following the request to them to find 600 million that Tegeta was short, and the same amount which was the 586 million, which was the prepayment? Why do you think they filed a report with the Hawks that there was a concern about corrupt activities?
I don't know.
Did you read that in the Public Protector's report?
No, I also saw that Piers Marsden talked about it when he was here, but I don't know why they filed a complaint with the Hawks.
So you didn't read it in the Public Protector's report?
I did, and Piers Marsden also talked about it when he was here.
Correct, correct, and it was a great concern to them because they...
Yeah, Mr. Swart, if I may.
Of course.
I have also reported Ms.
Yes.
Mazone to the police.
Yes, yes.
And nothing came of it.
Yes. So...
There was no case.
Allow that.
You see, the challenge for, you see, the version, yes, so you have a similar complaint with the Hawks. You see, well, one of the interesting aspects of this whole issue relating to state capture is the reluctance of the Hawks to investigate the observations in the Public Protector's report. Would you agree that that is a matter of concern?
No, I can't speak for the Hawks. I think they're very competent people. I think they take their work seriously, and I would not like to speculate like that.
But just on a factual basis, it's now over a year since the Public Protector's report was issued, and we have had no progress in this matter that was referred in terms of the Public Protectors Act to the Hawks.
I think you must take that matter up with the Minister of Police or Minister of Justice.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that. Lastly, I just wanted to ask you, the board, and you might have heard my question relating to Ms. Naidu earlier, the various board members, you're very experienced, you're far more experienced than I am on sitting on boards, PIC boards. Have you ever found a situation when you have so many board members, as you had at Eskom, that had direct links to two persons, and that is Mr. Salim Issa and the Gupta family? And just to remind you of what I put to the previous Ms. Naidu, Mr. Ben Ngubane, he served as co-director with Mr. Salim Issa. Mr. Mark Pomensky sat on the board of the Guptas Oak Bay Company. Ms. Naidu is the wife of Mr. Kuben Mudli, a friend and business associate of both the Guptas and Mr. Salim Issa. Mr. Romeo Kumalo was the co-director with Mr. Salim Issa. Mr. Nazir Karim is married to the first cousin of Mr. Salim Issa. Mr. Mariam Kassin is a former employee of the Gupta's Sahara Computers Company. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 board members that are newly appointed that have all got links to Mr. Salim Issa and Mr. Gupta. Do you not find that strange and something that is inexplicable, or have you ever experienced something like that in your board experience?
I think those board members should answer for themselves on those, and I think Ms. Piroshni Naidu was here, she explained, and I think all of them should explain in a similar fashion. As I say, when I was at Eskom, when I arrived at Eskom, my primary focus was load shedding. So I was not going and investigating who has a relationship or whose husband has a company where and so on. In fact, I actually stayed out of those issues because there was a very important job to do, which was eradicate load shedding.
And I appreciate the work that you did there, but as a concluding comment, you've admitted that you also had a healthy relationship with Mr. Gupta. I'm not sure if you also indicated your friendship with Mr. Salim Issa or not.
I've never met Mr. Salim Issa. I have never talked about the healthy relationship with Mr. Gupta, but I have said I know him. I know him. I cannot sit here, and I've said to this committee before when I appeared last year, that I cannot say I don't know them. I do know them. I have been to their house. They've invited me for Diwali and other social functions in the past that I have honored, just like I have been invited by other people. So I know them. I have been to their house, but I have never done anything illegal with them.
Very last question, and that relates to, and you might, I don't want to be unfair to you, but the Transnet, you weren't asked to comment on this, you weren't asked to prepare for this, but the locomotive contract that has been in the news a lot. Were you aware of that contract at all? And were you aware of the role that Mr. Salim Issa played in the purchase of a number of locomotives from the Chinese South Rail, that contract?
I'm not aware that Mr. Salim Issa played a role. There's a journalist who called and said he's got an email that there is an email that was sent to me by the Chinese asking to view a facility at Swart. And I forwarded the email to Mr. Gama, and he said, are you aware that, I don't know, he said, Mr. Salim Issa or somebody has got that email. I said, I'm not aware. I don't even know how you got to know that information, and I'm not aware of Salim Issa's involvement in the locomotive contract.
It was maybe just to assist you, and you might not be aware, but the Tequestra company that brokered the locomotive deal with the Chinese manufacturer and then obtained a 5.3 billion rand commission for the introduction, and that is in the Gupta leaked emails as well as in the outer document SOE 34. And what is astounding is a contract, and I'm sure your legal counsel would be astounded that there's a contract with a clause that requires certain work to be done by Sequestra, but it says it is hereby noted and agreed between the parties that the services which are to be provided have been provided and will conclude in the company signing the contract for the project. So that clause is worth 5.4 billion rand, and that is the 10 million on every 50 million rand locomotive. But you've indicated you're not aware of that. So
I'm not
thank
aware
you
of
very
that.
much, Mr. Molefe. Thank you.